So good evening, everyone. So in the last class, we have started with the reproduction in organisms, and on the same lines, we're going to continue from the same. We were discussing the various asexual modes of reproduction in the previous class, and we'll be continuing our lecture from the same, and we'll be heading on to wrapping off this chapter with the sexual mode of reproduction. Right, so we have discussed that there are present the various modes of asexual mode of reproduction, out of which if I give just a synopsis, so it was there that we've done the binary fission, we have done the budding torulation part, and now we're going to stream up with the other modes of asexual mode of reproductions, right? So we'll be continuing with the reproduction in organisms. Okay. Next is sporulation, right? Sporulation in the sense means something related to the spores, right? We have spores generated during the unfavorable conditions also and during the favorable conditions also. So sporulation jo hota hai, that are the specialized reproductive structures. Those reproductive structures are referred to as your spores. Depending upon what lifespan do they have, on the same lines, different kinds of spores in different organisms perform different function, and they act differently. They can be under favorable conditions or they can be under unfavorable conditions, right? So they are minute. They are very, very small. They are very minute, single-celled and thin-walled. So they will always be present as very minute, very smaller ones, and then they will be very thin-walled. However, there are a few spores which under unfavorable conditions jo hai, they act upon the upon unfavorable conditions, so they form a very thick layer. So sporulation will be dealing with a few different spores with their different habits, with their different behavior, how they behave in different environmental conditions, and how do different organisms contribute to them, sporulation, right? So we'll be discussing a few spores, a few habits of these spores and different spores. So types, if we talk about the first type that we have is the zoospore type. So zoospore type is the one that is very microscopic in structure, right? Which could not be seen with the naked eye, and when it is microscopic, so we could say that how minute it would be. But that structure holds a very big reproductive life in itself. So zoospore jo hota hai, that is microscopic motile structure which can be grown endogenously. Now there is a question arises, what is exogenous and what is endogenous? So exogenous is the one that is produced outside the body, that is exo, and there are certain which are endogenous. Endogenous means which are present inside. So endo is something internal or something present inner, whereas exogenous is something towards the outside. So zoospores particularly, the points that you have to remember here is that they are endogenous. Right, so they are endogenous. For example, the most common example is Chlamydomonas. Good evening, hello everyone. I hope you all are good. Okay, so we just begin with the spores. So sporulation, any kind of spores during unfavorable, it depends that in some organisms it may be, unfavorable or it can be favorable. However, it could be, in a positive sense to someone or it could be negative sense to anyone. So now the zoospores, they are the microscopic motile structures. Motile in the sense that means they would be somewhere helping in movement and locomotion, right? So there was they will be associated with movement and the locomotion. And one particular example for that is Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas jo hai, that belongs to the class of green algae. Hello everyone, good evening to all. Right, so basically जो zoospores होते हैं, zoospores is like having the flagella or some other motile structures present on them that help to movement, that helps to move, that helps to locomote from one place to another, help to transfer. Basically क्या होता है कि there is a body of an organism, like you say this, that is a Chlamydomonas body, in which under the favorable conditions some spores develop inside the body of the organism only, which is flagellated, that consists of flagella, so that it can be for movement and traveling, locomotion for example, उसके लिए ये जरूर होता है. इसके क्या होता है कि इसकी बॉडी के अंदर बहुत सारे जो है वो zoospores बनने शुरू हो जाएंगे, right? And upon the onset of some of the favorable conditions, when they will be matured enough, they will be exerted, they will be bursted out from the body of the Chlamydomonas, and each one of them is capable of forming a complete new organism. Right, so these are the things you have to remember, that they grow endogenously. That means they will be growing inside the body of the organism. So once they are growing inside the body of the organism, so that would be the endogenous. And there was a question somewhere कि you need to differentiate which among them of the following would be the endogenous spores and which among the following will be the exogenous spores, right? So both is different, and you have to remember, because in the coming number of spores we'll be saying it. So for example, Chlamydomonas, you have a number of spores which upon the onset of the favorable conditions will be exerted out from the body, and each one germinating to form a complete new organism. Done. So this is about the zoospores, and particular example for that is Chlamydomonas, which is a algae. This is about zoospores. The second one that we're going to see is Conidia. Right. So that is Conidia. The only difference between Conidia and zoospores is, again, depending upon the position in which they are present, that is exogenous. Right. So they are exogenous. Right, that means they will be developed outside the body of the organism, right? These spores will be developed outside the body of the organism. If you could see here, right, if you could see here, can you see these pores, minute pores? They are referred to as the conidial chains, and it is referred to as your conidia. So this is developed over the body of an organism. So since it is developed over the body of the organism, so they will be referred to as your exogenous spores. They are non-motile. Now again, if someone asked you the question that write the difference between the zoospores and the conidia, so one thing that you're going to write is endogenous and exogenous. The other thing that you have to write is that the zoospores are motile in structures, whereas the conidia is non-motile. Right, so they will be non-motile, which is produced on the hyphal branches, which is referred to known as conidiophore. So conidiophore हम एक तरह से ये कह सकते हैं कि एक एंकरेज के लिए जिसके ऊपर ये डेवलप होते हैं, जिनके ऊपर ये कोनिडियास जो है वो डेवलप होते हैं, they are referred to as your conidiophore. So could you see this, that there is a holding a stem that is holding the conidias together. So this stem is referred to as your conidiophore, and over the top you have a bit bulkier structure, and over that the conidia or the exogenous spores are developed. So this phase is this type of asexual mode of reproduction is quite common in penicillium, and penicillium belongs to fungi. They are the ones that belongs to fungi, and penicillium is a fungi from which you obtain an antibiotic which is known as penicillin. So penicillin is a name of the antibiotic, and the penicillium is the example of a fungus from where it is usually achieved, and it is reproducing with the help of Conidia. So first question that arises from this class for your test is that what would be the difference between Conidia and the zoospores? Am I clear? So this you have to remember. This is your first question from this class. Okay, so Conidia, and obviously somewhere you have to remember that there is a conidiophore also, but even if you remember the examples and exogenous, and they are non-motile because it does not possess any of the flagellated structures or any of the ciliated structures that help in movement and locomotion. Right? Okay. Next part is gemme. So gemme cups, I'm sure you had done in your 11th standard when we were doing plant kingdom. They used to have a bryophyte class of plant kingdom that consists of the gemme cups. So gemme cups are such kind in which the reproductive structures would be, be in a protective forms. So gemme cup is very green. They are multicellular, so they are green in structure, and they are multicellular. So that means they are, achieving a much level higher efficiency of the function. So it is green, multicellular. Then you have the asexual buds, which develop on small receptacles, which are referred to as your gemme cups. And gemme separate from parent body and germinate to form the new individual. So it will be germinating, it will be detaching, germinating. So gamets are going to be separated from the parent body, and then they would be germinating to form a complete new organism. Right? And for example, liverworts and liverworts belong to the class of bryophytes. So if you talk about in liverworts in particular, so it is the bryophytes represent the lower group of plants. Hello everyone, good evening. So liverworts belong to the bryophytes that you have to remember, and usually the liverworts, usually you have a number of organisms in the bryophyte, but still you have some in which the gemme cups are more popular. So in that, so gemme cups, for example, the liverworts or the bryophytes, that belongs to the class of bryophytes. Right, so if you see the structure here, that is similarly to that of what has given in your NCERT book. Markensia belongs to a class of liverwort. So can you see here, can you see that you have a green colored structure which is referred to as gemma cups, and in which, over which you have the male and female, right? Bilkul, you can, you can just revert back to the class again. You can rewind a bit. And since it is just the beginning, so I think you will be able to get up. Yeah, not a problem. Right, so gemme cups are the ones, they are asexual. Somewhere or the other, they can ask you odd one out. So you have to remember that what are the various asexual modes of reproduction, though you does not have many of the sexual mode of reproduction. Sexual mode of reproduction is just one, whereas the asexual mode of reproduction, you have a number of modes in which you have to remember what goes what after the nest or what goes in it, right? So that is, so that with this we complete the asexual mode of reproduction, right? Basically the asexual mode of reproduction, the only thing let's do recapitulate it. The first we have discussed is the binary fission. The next one is the budding, torulation that we have discussed. Uske baad we have come to the sporulation part. Gemme cups, favorable, unfavorable conditions do depend upon it, but still it goes. Right. So the next part is, in what related to that of the asexual mode of reproduction and is referred to as your vegetative propagation. Right. So vegetative propagation is considered to be just alike to that of the asexual mode of reproduction, but this is only with the vegetative parts, and therefore it is only restricted to the plants. Now it is not restricted to, it is just restricted to plants, and it does not happen in animals or the other microorganisms, right? So it is not very common in that, but however the plants, majority of plants में भी अगर देखें more than half plants में भी देखें तो उनमें vegetative propagation जो होता है वो बहुत ही ज्यादा प्रोग्रेसिव रहता है और बहुत ही ज्यादा इट इज वेरी कॉमन इन इट. So vegetative parts are there. So vegetative propagation is when you use the vegetative parts of the plant, particularly vegetative में roots आ सकते हैं, stems आ सकते हैं, leaves आ सकते हैं. You have number of vegetative parts, and those vegetative parts को जब हम use करते हैं, germinate करते हैं, ताकि उससे हम new organisms जो हैं वो synthesize कर सके, that is referred to as your vegetative propagation. Right? Good evening, guys. And that is referred to as your vegetative propagation. So let's discuss. तो उसको कई बार हम, we only keep it restricted to the plants, and we'll be discussing a few examples from where it would be clear that how the vegetative propagation holds for that of the plants only. Right. So it says that the new plants are generated from the vegetative units, and those vegetative units could be, the roots, they could be the stems, they could be the leaves, or they could be any other structure other than that. Right. So new plants are generated from the vegetative units, and there are two types. एक तो हम natural vegetative कह सकते हैं, और दूसरा जो हम कहता है वो कहता है artificial. So you can just add up here that you have the natural vegetative systems. Right. So you have the natural vegetative units, and you have the artificial vegetative. So obviously which are naturally propagated will be the natural vegetative, and which are artificially propagated, they will be the artificial, or that we are germinating it or making it happen. That propagation, if we are making it happen, that will be artificial one. Right. So one by one we're going to discuss. However, the artificial one is important from your competitive point of view, and the artificial, the NCERT does not stand with that of the artificial one. So it has discussed only the natural methods of discussion. Right. So let's come up to the natural vegetative methods, natural vegetative propagation. First, we'll be discussing about the roots. That how roots are, utilized as the natural vegetative part. So roots, we say that they are the modified tuberous roots. They could be any. So in 11th, we already discussed the various modifications of the root, and upon that only we're going to discuss about what are the tuberous roots, which are the fibrous roots, fasciculated roots, and so on. So if I give you an example of it, how the roots, कैसे हम root से निकालकर और root organism और वो ही capable है पूरे organism को draw करने के लिए, तो that we're going to discuss. So it says that you have the modified tuberous roots of sweet potato. I'm sure everyone must be knowing about the sweet potato. The sweet potato is a underground underground root, and if we just germinate that underground root under the soil and under optimum condition, that will be generating the complete new organism from there. So however, we are using the roots, which is a vegetative part of the plant, in order to grow an organism. So it is the modified tuberous roots of sweet potato, dahlia, and Tinospora. So these are examples that you have to remember. They can directly ask you a 1-mark question, or they can directly ask you a question that, okay, which vegetative part of Tinospora is used for vegetative propagation? So you'll write, yes, Tinospora is the modified fibrous roots. Then is adventitious bud dweller from roots. somewhere you have the adventitious roots also, और उसमें कहीं ना कहीं पे you have the buds from where your shoot system जो है that develops, और branches जो है that develop. So adventitious buds develop from the roots of populus and Mraya and guava. Right, so particularly guava के अंदर हमने देखा है कि you have the adventitious roots. If you grow them in the soil under optimum conditions, that will be forming a complete new organism. Right, so these are about the roots. Examples, do keep in mind the examples. Right. So could you see that there is a picture of, this is a sweet potato, right? The sweet potato, if we're going to germinate it, they will be forming, you know, the complete new organism in itself. So it will be forming the complete new organism from there. Right, so next is stem. So the next vegetative part that we are going to discuss is the stem. However, we have roots. अगर हम obviously roots से तो propagate करता ही है, कोई भी plant organism अगर हम देखें तो वो root से develop होता ही है, ये root से propagate होता ही है. And the next part, that next vegetative part that we are going to discuss is the underground stem. Now stem can be in any forms, like if you could say that stem जो है, stem could be underground, it could be subaerial, or it could be serial. So before doing this question, this chapter, I think you must be knowing something about the morphology from your 11th standard, so that you could able to make up how the things are going out, how the things are going up in the modified parts. So it says that underground, if we talk about the underground stem, we'll be talking about the stem in three forms, that is either the underground stem, then the subaerial, and then the aerial one. So if we talk about the underground stem, so we have tuber, for example potato, right? If we potato is an underground stem, so once we start growing it, or once we start germinating it, will be forming the complete new organism. So tuber jo hai, that is for example your potato. Rhizome, you must have seen the ginger, so that is a rhizome. Then bulb, onion, garlic, comb, colocasia, and bulb is agave. So इसमें क्या होता है कि usually if we take a part of it and we'll try to germinate it, even a part of a stem, this is a part of a stem, even if we take it a part of a stem and then starts to germinate it, it'll be forming a complete new organism. Next is subaerial stem. If we talk about the subaerial part of the stem, right, the subaerial part of the stem is something which is, you know, half in the air and half in the water, or we can say half in the ground. So that is referred to as your subaerial stem. Some aerial will be one, sub means somewhere in the center, right? So half of the body would be there present in the soil or ground, and half of the body would be there present in the air. Right, so subaerial stem, it includes the sucker, runner, stolons, and offsets. Right, so they could be of four types. The subaerial stems jo hai, they could be of four types that we are going to discuss, and you have very you know, minute differences between them in order to understand it. So let's come up to the first, which is referred to as your sucker. Sucker says that it is a short underground stem, so somewhere it will going to present in the soil, right? So sucker, for sucker you have to remember that it is a underground. So if we are dealing with the stem, so that means it is going to be the half in the underground, branches that arise from the base of the aerial shoot. For example, you have the mint, right? We're going to discuss with the help of a diagram. We'll be seeing how it goes. So you have to remember that the suckers are the underground one, which arises from the base of the aerial shoot. That will always be arising from the base of the aerial shoot. For example, mint, for example, chrysanthemum. Next is runners. So runner is somewhere related to the run-in parted plant, right? So that would be in the runner on the marathon basis, right? So it is the elongated and subaerial branch, which is with long internodes and roots at the node. So just like, you know what is a node and an internode? जो node और internode होता है वो basically, let's suppose this is a stem, right? And if you possesses these solid structures in between, they are referred to as your nodes. And the distance between the two nodes, these distance that you could see, that is referred to as your internode. Right. So the runner is the one that is elongated subaerial branch which have the long internodes, right, which have the long internodes and the roots that starts to arise from these internodes, right? The roots are arising from here and you have the very long internodes. For example, we have the grasses and the scintilla. The third is stolon. So stolon is the one that will grow in a horizontal portion, giving rise to roots and aerial branches from the node. So it is going to give up. ऐसा नहीं होता कि वो जो branches हैं वो it depends करता है कि वो ground को लगे या फिर वो stem को लगे. So it keeps on going like that. So stolons are the growing, grow horizontal, giving rise to roots and aerial branches from the nodes. For example, Vallisneria. So Vallisneria is an aquatic plant. So you have to remember that somewhere or the stolon is related to the aquatic stem, right? And last is the offset. It is a short horizontal branch which produces a cluster of leaves above and below. So what if you can see that over, over the stem you have number of different branches, number of different, shoots that are developing. So now when the shoots are developing, so you have the cluster of branches or cluster of shoots over here. So which is present above and which is present below. So that is referred to as your offset. Right. So offset, stolon, sucker, runner, these are important. So offset is a short horizontal branch which is producing cluster leaves above and below. For example, Iconia and Pistia. So Iconia is the one that is referred to as water hyacinth. That is also referred to as the terror of Bengal. Ab aisa kyun hua tha na? Why it is referred to as terror of Bengal? Because this was, Iconia was introduced into the Bay of Bengal, and it has such widest structure or such a network of the stem branches, just like the offset. तो क्या होता था कि वहां पे जितने भी फिशेस आते थे, एक्वाटिक ऑर्गेनिजम्स आते थे ना, वो आके पहली बात तो वो दे गेट इंटैंगल्ड इन, वो फंस जाते थे. और दूसरी चीज जो होती थी वो होती थी कि भाई ये जो ऑफसेट है, इट takes up the dissolved oxygen to a much greater extent. तो अब वो फंस भी गए और वहां पे जो dissolved oxygen है उनके लिए एक प्राइम नेसेसिटी ऑफ रेस्पिरेशन, दैट इज ऑल्सो नॉट प्रेजेंट. वो भी प्रेजेंट नहीं है. तो जब वो भी प्रेजेंट नहीं है और उनको डिसॉल्व ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिल रहा, एंड दे आर गेटिंग एंटैंगल्ड, सो दैट इज व्हाई दे डाई ऑफ. तो इसीलिए क्या हुआ था कि वंस दे डाई ऑफ, सो इट वाज अ थ्रेट टू ऑल द एक्वाटिक ऑर्गेनिज्म दैट वर स्टेइंग देयर, right? So that is an offset. Iconia and you have the Pistia. These are also your aquatic plants. So अगर हम देखें तो stolon और offset, ये दोनों set जो है that contributes to the aquatic system, whereas the first and the second holds for the terrestrial. या फिर जो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि भाई it is land. राइट. सो जो ये याद रखेंगे कि जो स्टोलन है और ऑफसेट है वो एक्वाटिक है. स्टोलन ग्रो हॉरिजॉन्टली है, मतलब हॉरिजॉन्टली जाएगा एंड गिविंग राइज टू रूट्स एंड द एरियल ब्रांचेस फ्रॉम द नोड्स. तो वहां से एरियल जो ऊपर आ जाए ब्रांचेस उसको राइज करेगा, वेयर एज द ऑफसेट इज ऑल्सो हॉरिजॉन्टल ब्रांच विच प्रोड्यूसेस अ क्लस्टर ऑफ द leaves and which is above and below ones. So if for example it is Iconia, pistia, and so on. Right, so you have to remember. Let's look up at the diagrams and then we could see it better, a picture of it. Right, so sucker is short underground hai with the base that is arising from the base of aerial shoot. Runner जो हो गया उसके पास बहुत long internodes है, so we could able to recognize that it has the the longer internode, so we could able to easily recognize it. Then you have the stolon that give rise to roots and aerial branches from the nodes. For example, you have Vallisneria and offset again, right? So let's, with the help of a diagram, let's look up them. So first let's do this, right? Let's do this. So first we have done the stem, that is the underground stem. And understand, underground stem consists of a tuber which has the potato. Then you have the rhizome, ginger, turmeric, water lily, cannon, bananas. In some में rhizome वो होता है. Then corms is colocasia, and then you have bulb, onion or garlic, right? That have the fleshy leaves in it, that is edible. So we generally going to take up garlic or onion as in the form of a fleshy leaves, right? Okay, let's come up to here. Runner, stolen, sucker, and the offset. Can you see all the four pictures together? So now related to what we have discussed, right? हमने stolen के बारे में क्या पढ़ा था, हमने sucker के बारे में क्या पढ़ा था, हमने offset के बारे में क्या पढ़ा था. Now we could able to recognize it better. Can you relate it to what we have discussed? Okay. So runner, for example, grasses you have, they keep on running over the surface. Stolen, जैसे mint वगैरह में होता है. Then you have the sucker, as in banana. There is a horizontal branch which is touching the ground, which is growing and then coming up. And then you have the offset, that is pistia and echonna. It is usually seen in the aquatic organisms. Are we clear? This is a diagram which has been taken from your NCERT book, so you could directly relate to it, right? So please remember the underground stem, because somewhere or the other we do not, the potato does not look like the stem, the onion doesn't look like the stem. So if you see that, so they are the stem, and you have to see which structure is associated with what, right? Next is leaf. So we have discussed about the root also. We have done the roots, and then we have discussed the stem. And stem, what we have discussed about it, that it has, the underground part and the aerial, sub-aerial part. So usually वहाँ पर जो रहता है वो हमारा वहाँ कहीं ना कहीं से vegetative propagation के लिए it is helping us out. Next is leaf. It says that the leaf of several plants have adventitious buds. Right, so it is going to possess the adventitious bud which remain dormant. Dormant वाली जो stage होती है वो एक ऐसी stage होती है, वो थोड़ी सी inactiveness जो show करता है वो वाली stage होती है वो, right? It has a slide which shows the inactiveness, and then after it, it will become metabolically, it is usually metabolically active. It remains tend to remain inside the inactive form, and once ever any stimulus is given, it starts to stimulate itself and then metabolize to produce more structures associated with it. So leaf जो है, the leaf of several plants has adventitious buds, and they remain dormant when the leaf is attached with the plant, but when come in contact with the favorable condition, they will grow the suitable, then there will be the growth of the suitable plantlets, and therefore it is, since the plantlets are coming out from it, so it refers to as the vegetative propagation. So vegetative propagation के लिए कोई भी एक ऐसा vegetative part चाहिए होता है जिसकी वजह से वो वहां तक develop कर सके. Right, so it remained dormant when the leaf is attached with the plant, but when come in contact with favorable condition, develop new plantlets. For example, you have the bryophyllum and you have the adiantum. Right, so adiantum is a fern only, And the bryophyllum, can you see that over the leaf you have some of the buds that could be very clearly visible, and from there the vegetative parts, plantlets appear, and when you grow those plantlets under optimum conditions, starts to germinate and under optimum conditions, a complete new organism will be formed from it. Right, so if you could relate it with the diagram. Right, so that is where, so over the leaf also, but it is very rare because over the leaves are, अगर देखा जाए तो roots और stem में से जो leaves होते हैं वो बहुत कम vegetatively propagate करने में help करते हैं. Right, so over the leaf you have the adventitious roots that you have to remember. So these are the ones that under the favorable environmental condition they will be growing, and they will be vegetatively propagating, and they will be forming the complete set of new plantlets. Are we done? So we have discussed about the roots also, through how they are vegetatively propagated through roots, what are differently vegetatively propagated by the stem, and now the leaves. For example is, yes, you have to remember the examples that, usually you fetch more marks while writing the example. So you have to remember that which particular form is associated with which particular example. Okay, with this you complete the natural methods, right? The natural, how naturally the vegetative propagation could bring about, right? How we could bring about. And now we're going to discuss about the artificial propagation. So how we can, artificially propagate different structures of it so that it can develop the new plant organisms, right? So you have cutting, you have layering, you have grafting, and you have micro propagation. Cutting में क्या होता है कि हम किसी भी चीज की, किसी भी प्लांट की या तो रूट कटिंग ले लेंगे या स्टेम कटिंग ले लेंगे, कोई भी ऐसा कटिंग ले लेंगे प्लांट का, विच इज वाइल जर्मिनेटिंग, जिसको हम जिस कटिंग को हम जर्मिनेट करेंगे और दैट विल बी प्रोड्यूसिंग अ कंप्लीट सेट ऑफ न्यू ऑर्गेनिजम्स. तो ये जो कंप्लीट सेट, इसको हम कहते हैं, वी कॉल इट एज कटिंग. And then is layering. What we do in layering is that we take up a part, we just take up a part and then we just grow inside the soil, right? That cutted part is grown inside the soil. It will again develop into a complete new organism. It will be coming out from the soil and forming a one complete new organism. Next is grafting. I'm sure you know what a graft is. In any artificial tissue or a cell given to any organism which it helps to जिस भी part के लिए वो use किया उसको फिर grow करके वो आएगा. तो grafting जो है, that is referred to as when you just shift a part, and that shifting parts जो होते हैं उसको हम stalk और scion कहते हैं, right? We call it as stalk and scion. Right, so this grafting have two parts, scion and the stalk. राइट ऐसे करते हैं कि हम एक प्लांट लेते हैं, उसका हमने लेट सपोज वो उसका हमने स्टेम को है जो कट कर दिया, और किसी और प्लांट की स्टेम हमने वहां आर्टिफिशियली जो है वो फिक्स कर दी, एंड देन वी अलाउ देम टू ग्रो फर्दर और जर्मिनेट फर्दर इन ऑर्डर टू फॉर्म अ कंप्लीट न्यू प्लांटलेट. सो दैट इज रेफर टू एज ग्राफ्टिंग. ग्राफ्टिंग के लिए हमें दो चीजें चाहिए, स्टॉक श्योन, डिपेंड करता है कि कैसे. सो कटिंग हो गया, दैट वी हैव मेड इट अ कट एंड वी हैव टेकन अ स्मॉल cutted portion, germinate in the soil, that will form the complete new organism. After that there is layering. Layering is you can cut a portion of part and वही cutted portion को plant के साथ साथ we will germinate into the soil, and once we start to germinate into the soil it will be forming the complete new organisms from there, right? And grafting is you are taking a part from one plant, attaching it to some other plant, right? And micropropagation is the most emerging one. that you use certain propagated organisms, such propagated microorganisms to yield a part of it. Like just we can see that we can just take a plantlet, or we can just take a few cells, or we can just take a few tissues associated, and then we can propagate it. Then we can germinate and produce new plantlets from there. So that is micro propagation. मतलब माइक्रो प्रोपगेशन में हम बिल्कुल प्लांट का सबसे छोटा हिस्सा यूज कर रहे हैं, मतलब कुछ सेल्स यूज कर रहे हैं, या जैसे उसमें ये माइक्रो propagation में the most extensive field that is coming to is tissue culture, right, where we are just taking a part of cells, or we are just taking a part of tissue, allowed to germinate under providing a nutritive medium to it, and then growing into a complete new organism. So that is referred to as your micropropagation. So micropropagation is the one when we are using very small amount of it. So micro is having very small amount of it. So when we are using that very small amount of it and allowing it to grow, that is referred to as your micropropagation. Right. So it includes the cutting, it includes the layering, it includes the grafting, and then you have the micropropagation. So they are a few artificial hybridization. Obviously, this plant cannot do it on its own, right? This is what we have to perform. So since the plant does not able to produce in itself, cut in itself and start germinating somewhere, or it says I just wanted to replace one part of my body with some other one. So अगर ये कहे कि भाई जो ट्यूलिप्स है वो कहें कि नहीं भाई हमने जो स्टेम है वो रोज वाली लेके आनी है, तो obviously it is not done by itself, it is artificially. So that is why these methods जो हैं they are included under artificial propagation. So artificially, which is with the help of certain exterior material, right? So this is, so with this we complete the asexual mode of reproduction. तो कहीं ना कहीं अगर देखा जाए तो वेजिटेटिव प्रोपगेशन जो है वो asexual mode of reproduction का एक ऐसा पॉइंट है कि हाँ उसमें asexually reproduction हो रहा है, but that is with the help of the specialized vegetative parts. अब वो stem हो सकता है, वो root हो सकता है, it can be leaf. So that is with the help of certain vegetative parts only, which is propagating to form a complete new organism. So when it is doing naturally by the plant, excuse me, when it is doing naturally, it is known as natural vegetative propagation, and अगर ये artificial हुआ है तो it is referred to as your artificial vegetative propagation. So with this we complete the vegetative propagation point, right? So और इसी के साथ we have completed with the asexual mode of reproduction. So we completed with the asexual mode of reproduction. However, the vegetative is considered to be the part of the asexual mode of reproduction only, and now we are progressing further. Right, so with this you complete the natural. Usually artificial जो है वो competitive exams में पूछे जाते हैं what is the artificial modes of how they work, right? So with this you complete the artificial propagation. Okay, so that means the asexual mode of reproduction is completed. Now we headed on to the sexual mode of reproduction. हमने ना we have discussed in the previous class also that what is the asexual mode of reproduction, which is the sexual mode of reproduction. We have done. Right, so I'm sure till now you must have an idea that how the sexual mode of reproduction goes, how the asexual mode of reproduction goes. So with respect to the sexual mode of reproduction, as we had discussed in the we have discussed the advantages also, we discussed the disadvantages also, and we have discussed about how the sexual mode of reproduction takes place. Right, so one prime reason, aspect that is required for the sexual mode of reproduction is biparental nature. Biparental nature का मतलब है कि कहीं ना कहीं पे sexual mode of reproduction के अंदर there is a requirement of two parents. So there is always a requirement of the two parents, obviously each forming the different gametes. So once it start forming the different gametes, it would able to those gametes will fuse together to form a complete new organism. So sexual mode of reproduction is biparental in nature. So it will always that you require the two kinds of parents. So now there are the various events that take place in a sexual mode of reproduction. There occurs various events or various methods that are taking place one after the other. So what is their events we going to discuss, as we have already discussed about the sexual mode of reproduction in the previous class. We have discussed that how it happens or what all is needed in the sexual mode of reproduction and how it is different from that of the asexual mode of reproduction and how it goes on. राइट सो लेट्स डिस्कस. सो सेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन के इवेंट्स हम स्टार्ट करेंगे. Those events include the pre-fertilization events, fertilization events, and post-fertilization events. Right. Now there comes what revolves around these events is the fertilization process. Right. So fertilization जो होता है, फर्टिलाइजेशन इज फ्यूजन ऑफ द टू गैमीट्स. अब हमने क्या बोला कि सेक्सुअल मोड ऑफ रिप्रोडक्शन जो है वो बायपेरेंटल है. दैट मीन्स यू रिक्वायर टू पेरेंट्स फॉर इट, राइट? एंड दोज टू पेरेंट्स आर केपेबल ऑफ प्रोड्यूसिंग अ वेरी डिस्क्रीट reproductive units जिसको हम कहते हैं gametes. Those gametes, and once those gametes are fused, so they will be the one that will be forming the gametes. So this fusion of the two parents, two different parents which are genetically different, are fusing, their gametes are fusing together. It is referred to as your fertilization. राइट. तो इसके पहले जो इवेंट्स होंगे वो होंगे प्री फर्टिलाइजेशन. इसके बाद में जो इवेंट्स होंगे दे विल बी द पोस्ट फर्टिलाइजेशन. और जो बीच में जो फर्टिलाइजेशन का प्रोसेस होगा दैट विल बी द फर्टिलाइजेशन प्रोसेस. राइट. सो सेक्सुअल रिप्रोडक्शन जो है उनके जो इवेंट्स हैं दैट इंक्लूड द प्री फर्टिलाइजेशन पीरियड, फर्टिलाइजेशन एंड पोस्ट फर्टिलाइजेशन. So let us come to the first, that is pre-fertilization event. अब fertilization होने से पहले के events क्या है? सबसे पहले जो होगा वो होगा that there will be formation of the gametes. Obviously, without gametes, how could the sexual mode of reproduction could take place? तो इसीलिए first जो characteristic या first event जो है that is your gametogenesis. So gametogenesis is referred to as the process of formation of gametes. Obviously, अगर gametes नहीं बने तो there is no chances of having fusion, right? After that, now the gametes will be formed. They must need to be transferred. So that gamete transfer is also a pre-fertilization event. राइट. तो प्री फर्टिलाइजेशन इवेंट के अंदर दो चीजें आती हैं. मतलब फर्टिलाइजेशन से पहले हमें क्या क्या चीजें चाहिए? एक तो हमें गैमीट्स चाहिए. तो भाई इसलिए गैमीट्स का प्रोडक्शन या गैमीट्स का फॉर्मेशन जो है वो जरूरी है. द सेकेंड थिंग इज दैट वी नीड टू ट्रांसफर द गैमीट्स. राइट. नाउ सो अगर हम देखें गैमीटोजेनेसिस, इट इज द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ दी गैमीट. सो गैमीटोजेनेसिस इज एनी, चाहे वो पेरेंट, जो भी पेरेंट है, अगर वो पेरेंट गैमीट्स बना रहा है तो उसके प्रोसेस को दैट इज रेफर टू एज योर गैमीटोजेनेसिस. एंड ऑन द बेसिस, अगर और इन गैमीट्स के बेसिस पे हम गैमीट्स को जो है वो डिफरेंशिएट भी करते हैं, या हम देखते हैं कि भाई हमें कितने टाइप्स ऑफ डिफरेंट जो है वो गैमीट्स देखने को मिलते हैं. सो ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ अपीयरेंस ऑफ द गैमीट्स, हाउ द अपीयरेंस, व्हाट विल बी द अपीयरेंस, हाउ द गैमीट्स लुक लाइक, दे कैन बी आइसोगैमीट्स, anisogametes and oogametes. Oogamous या हम कह देते हैं oogametes. So let's come up to the first, that is isogametes. Iso का मतलब होता है same. Right, so that is iso means which have the same. So agar male and female gametes are not distinguishable, that means they cannot be distinguished. We cannot say that okay, there are present two gametes and we could not able to differentiate that which one would be of one parent and which would be of the other parents. When both the gametes have the same, they are morphologically indistinct they are not distinct, they are indistinct, they are similar. So that is referred to as your isogametes, and it occurs in cladophora. Right, so it occurs in cladophora, where you can find that okay, both the parents involved have same type of gametes, and it is morphologically indistinct in order to make them. Right, so next is anisogametes. Anisogametes का मतलब होता है जहां पर दोनों पेरेंट्स के जो gametes हैं वो morphologically distinct हैं. हम ये कह सकते हैं, देख के हम ये बता सकते हैं कि भाई ये वाला जो gamete होगा that will be of the male and the other gamete would be that of the female. Yeah, it would be of one parent and this could be of the other parent. So morphologically जितने भी distinct gametes हैं, they are referred to as your anisogamous. Right, for example fucus. नेक्स्ट इज anisogamous का ही एक मॉडिफाइड फॉर्म हम कहते हैं जिसको हम कहते हैं oogamous या oogametes. oogametes में क्या होता है, ये है तो anisogametes बट oogamous के अंदर क्या होता है कि there is a male and there is a female. The male is going to be smaller, larger in number, whereas the female is going to be, you know, bigger in size as compared to the male one and will be non-motile or will be fixed. Right, so oogamous का मतलब है जो male है वो small है in larger numbers and it is motile, whereas the female is bigger and is non-motile. In that sense we could say that they are oogametes. अगर हम humans की बात करें तो obviously egg के पास कोई भी movement या locomotion के लिए it does not possess any structure. So और but हमारे sperms, अगर हम human male gamete की बात करें sperms, तो it do possess the flagella for the movement. Right, so it do have the flagella for the movement, so that is referred to as your oogamous. Right, so isogametes, anisogametes and oogametes. So this should be very clear. So isogametes means where the two parent gametes, where the gametes from the two parents are morphologically indistinct, we cannot differentiate between them. That is isogametes. Anisogametes is the one where the gametes are distinguishable and we could able to recognize that this would be from one parent and this would be from the other parent. Then is oogamous, where the male will be small and motile and it would be present in large number or in abundance, whereas the female one is going to be the non-motile one and it will be lacking all the structure and would be bigger in size. So for example, just as in human beings we have the sperm and the egg. So this is about gametogenesis. Apart from that of gametogenesis, there is something to deal about, that is sexuality in an organism or sexuality of an organism. So there are different terms which are associated with the sexuality of an organism. The first one is that it is monoecious. Monoecious, right? Mono means a single. Right, so monoecious जो होता है, that is male and female reproductive structures which are present in the same organism. So only there is a one organism और उसी के अंदर ही male है और उसी के अंदर ही female है. That is referred to as your monoecious. Right, and it is also referred to as your bisexual or homothallic conditions. अब thallic का मतलब जो होता है ना, that is thallus like, that means plant body को, जिसमें हम ये कह सकते हैं कि भाई अच्छा roots होते हैं, stem होती है, leaves होते हैं, they are a thallus like structure. तो अगर वो plants में या किसी में जो भी plant like है उसमें हम कह देते हैं इसको homothallic. That means a single thallus will going to possess both the male as well as the female one. Right, so it says that monoecious is, you remember this, that monoecious is male and female reproductive structures which are present in the same organism. Bisexual condition or homothallic. Homothallic means that it is going to possess a thallus like body, and in the same thallus it is going to possess the male as well as that of the female part. For example, cucurbits and coconuts. Please do remember the examples. They are important from your exam point of view, because you have to say ki they can ask you whether they are bisexual or they are usually जो monoecious dioecious होता है, that usually stands for the that usually stands for the plants, monoecious dioecious, और यूनिसेक्सुअल बायसेक्सुअल भी प्लांट के लिए होता है, और ये हम ज्यादातर एनिमल्स के लिए हम यूज करते हैं कि भाई वो यूनिसेक्सुअल है या फिर वो बायसेक्सुअल है. Right, so monoecious is male and female reproductive structure which is present in the same organism. So it is referred to as a bisexual condition or a homothallic. Example is cucurbits and the coconuts. Next, there is something called as dioecious. Right, so there is something called as, which is known as dioecious. So di means two. Right, so dioecious is when male female is present and different. So male is separate in some separate plant organism and female would be in the separate plant organism. तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि भाई इसमें सिर्फ मेल फ्लावर्स ही आएंगे या इसमें सिर्फ इस प्लांट के अंदर सिर्फ फीमेल फ्लावर्स ही आएंगे. So dioecious is referred to as the male and female which are present in the different organisms. It is also referred to as unisexual. So unisexual का मतलब, uni का मतलब होता है एक ही. तो अगर एक ऑर्गेनिज्म में एक ही रिप्रोडक्टिव स्ट्रक्चर प्रेजेंट है, आइदर मेल और फीमेल, सो दैट वुड बी अ यूनिसेक्सुअल. और हेट्रोथैलिक हम इसलिए बोलेंगे कि भाई उसका जो मेल वाला थैलस है वो कोई और है और फीमेल वाला थैलस जो है वो कोई और है. So it is different. So male thallus is somewhat different and female thallic would be somewhere different. So for example, we have the papayas and we have the date palm, sorry. So just remember the examples. That is important. Right? So di means two. That means male and female is going to be present in the different individuals. Unisexual, that only one organism or one gender will be there in the one organism and not the other. So dioecious stands same for that of the unisexuality, or it is also referred to as your heterothallics. For example, you have the papaya, you have the date palms. So this is about the sexuality of the organisms. Now since we are discussing their sexuality, that whether it is monoecious, dioecious, unisexual, bisexual, homothallic, heterothallic, while discussing that, हमारे पास एक छोटी सी चीज आती है with respect to the life cycles. Right, इसी के basis पे we have the life cycle of an organism. This life cycle depending upon कि भाई अच्छा वो कैसा है, कैसा it is producing सिर्फ मेल है एक में या सिर्फ फीमेल है या दोनों है, how it is different. Just like that we have haplontic diplontic cycle. Right, and there is one more cycle which is also known as haplodiplontic cycle. So क्या होता है ना कि हैप्लॉन्टिक साइकिल वो होता है जिसमें हैप्लॉन्टिक या हैप्लॉइड स्ट्रक्चर जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा देर तक लाइफ में रहे, तो दैट इज रेफर्ड टू एज योर हैप्लॉन्टिक. हैप्लॉन्टिक का मतलब होता है हैप्लॉइड, और हैप्लॉइड का मतलब होता है दैट कंसिस्ट ऑफ हाफ द सेट ऑफ द क्रोमोसोम्स. मतलब जितने हमारे अंदर सेट होंगे ना, उसका कोई भी हाफ सेट will be referred to as your haplontic. अगर उसमें पूरा सेट है, hi guys, good evening, अगर उसमें पूरा सेट है तो then it is referred to as your diplontic. डिप्लॉयड, या हम उसको डिप्लॉयड ऑर्गेनिज्म. तो डिप्लॉयड कंडीशन वो होती है जिसमें पूरे सेट ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स या जर्म प्लाज्म जो है वो प्रेजेंट हो, दैट विल बी डिप्लॉन्टिक. और हैप्लॉन्टिक इज विच हैव दी हाफ द सेट ऑफ द क्रोमोसोम्स। और जो भी लाइफ साइकिल के अंदर जो भी ज्यादा देर के लिए रहेगा, ज्यादा देर के लिए इट विल बी स्टेइंग, दैट विल बी रेफर टू एज योर डोमिनेंट फेज ऑफ लाइफ। तो ऐसा नहीं है कि किसी प्लांट के अंदर या किसी ऑर्गेनिज्म के अंदर ये दोनों फेजेस प्रेवलेंट होते हैं। ऐसा नहीं है कि वो एक ही के साथ, अगर हैप्लॉइड है तो सिर्फ हैप्लॉइड के साथ ही जा रहा है, अगर वो डिप्लॉइड है तो वो डिप्लॉइड के साथ ही जा रहा है। इट इज नथिंग लाइक दैट, राइट। इट इज यूजुअली डिपिक्टिंग अपॉन कि कौन सा वाला फेज जो है, चाहे वो हैप्लॉइड सेट वाला फेज है, चाहे वो डिप्लॉइड सेट वाला सेट है, उसके अंदर कितनी लाइफ साइकिल में कितने अमाउंट से वो ज्यादा रह रहा है, अगर वो that is referred to as your dominance, right? So dominant phase of life is the one that is prevailing for a much longer period of time. तो अगर हम यहाँ देखें तो हैप्लॉन्टिक का मतलब होता है that which consist of half the set of chromosomes. For example, we have fungi, algae and bryophytes. Next is diplontic cycle, where we have the complete set of the chromosomes, right? You have the complete set of chromosomes. For example, pteridophyte, and we have the gymnosperms. और इसके साथ एक और लाइफ साइकिल होता है which is referred to as haplodiplontic, जिसमें हम ये कह सकते हैं कि भाई दोनों जो phases होती हैं, haplontic भी और diplontic भी, that is quite equal, and we could not justify that either it is going to be haplontic or it could be diplontic. So one, you can make a note of it, haplodiplontic. So that is also quite common. So haplodiplontic जो होगा उसमें दोनों phases जो है, haploid भी और diploid भी, they will be more prevalent. Right, so you have to remember all three. This is just what you have discussed in your previous class, right? Haplodiplontic in the plant kingdom, when you have started कि भाई अच्छा haplontic life cycle होता है, कौन सा phase ज़्यादा देर के लिए life के अंदर रहता है, haplontic रहता है, diplontic रहता है या haplodiplontic रहता है, right? So this next very important thing that to be noted is the meiocyte. Right, so meiocyte, what is a meiocyte? Meiocyte पे questions आते हैं. It says that inside the diploid organism, I'll just wrap this up for you. Right, it says inside the diploid organism. So diploid is the one that will be consisting of all the set of the chromosomal number in it. So they are the diploid organism which are specialized cells that undergo meiosis, right? They will be the one that will be undergoing the meiosis, right? तो मतलब अगर मियोसाइट का नंबर, मियोसाइट क्या होता है, डिप्लॉयड ऑर्गेनिज्म के अंदर कुछ ऐसे स्पेशलाइज्ड सेल्स जो मियोटिक डिवीजन करेंगे, राइट? मियोटिक डिवीजन करेंगे तो मियोसाइट आगे जाके जो भी सेल बनाएगा उसके अंदर इट इज गोइंग टू पोजेस द हैप्लॉइड सेट ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स, या इट हैज ओनली, अगर हम 2n सिचुएशन जो है, राइट, अगर हम 2n सिचुएशन को हम डिप्लॉयड कहते हैं तो हैप्लॉइड सिचुएशन होगी n, तो मतलब मियोसाइट वो एक डिप्लॉयड ऑर्गेनिज्म के अंदर एक डिप्लॉयड सेल है जो आगे चल के इट विल बी अंडरगोइंग द मियोसिस। तो और हमें पता है कि जो मियोसिस होगी दैट विल बी द रिडक्शनल डिविजन, सो द क्रोमोसोम नंबर विल बी रिड्यूस टू हाफ। तो ये अगर ये 2n है तो इट विल बी रिमेन्ड एज n। Understood? So that is meiocyte. So meiocyte जो है that is a diploid, or inside the diploid organism is that is this question is very much asked in your exam, what meiocyte, और तुम्हें नंबर भी दे सकते हैं उससे related. So it is the diploid organism having the specialized cells that will undergo meiotic division, right? So that will be the one that will be undergoing the meiotic division. Are you guys getting? Okay, Now there is a question for you. It says if the number of chromosomes in the gametes. Now you know that the number of gametes में जो होता है वो रहता है half set, right? Right. If you look at this question, it says that if the number of chromosome in gametes, so gametes will be the one that will having the n number of chromosomes in it. So it says if the number of chromosome in gametes is 39, what would be the number of chromosomes in the meiocyte? Yes, get me an answer to this. Quick, 1 minute. Get me the answer. What would be the answer to it? Since the number of chromosome in gametes would be 39, तो मियोसाइट क्या है? वो तो एक डिप्लॉयड सेल है, तो इसीलिए डिप्लॉयड इसका डबल हो जाएगा, तो इसलिए इसका आंसर जो होगा दैट विल बी 39 78. So answer would be your 78. Yes, correct. सो देखना कि भाई तुम्हें हैप्लॉइड सेल तो नहीं दिया हुआ या डिप्लॉयड सेल तो नहीं दिया हुआ, राइट? सो यू हैव टू सी अकॉर्डिंगली. सो इफ द नंबर ऑफ क्रोमोसोम्स यहाँ पर तुम्हें क्या दे रखे थे गैमीट के अंदर, एंड यू नो दैट द गैमीट पोजेसेस द हैप्लॉइड set of, so इसलिए 39, so therefore the number of chromosome inside the meiocyte will be 78. Why? Because the meiocyte is a diploid one, right, which will undergo meiosis. So since it is a diploid one and it will be the one that will undergoing the meiosis, so it will having the full set of chromosomes in it. So अगर हमें ये पता लग गया कि गैमीट है, तो गैमीट के अंदर हमेशा हैप्लॉइड सेट ऑफ क्रोमोसोम रहता है, और हमने क्या पता करना है, वी हैव टू डिस्कस अबाउट द डिप्लॉइड सेट. तो इसीलिए द आंसर टू दिस क्वेश्चन बिकम्स 78. Right? Okay, now the second process that we are going to discuss in pre-fertilization event is gamete transfer. Now we have formed the gametes. Now what if अगर तो मेल और फीमेल दोनों एक ही प्लांट के अंदर है तो कोई दिक्कत ही नहीं है. अगर we have the separate, for male we have the separate and for female we have the separate, so that means the male have to travel to the female. The male has to travel to the female in order to have the fertilization process, right? तो उन केसेस में जो गैमीट ट्रांसफर का है, तो गैमीट ट्रांसफर जो दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. सो इट सेज दैट जनरली हमें पता है, क्योंकि जो फीमेल वाला पार्ट है दैट रिमेन्स इमोबाइल, राइट, दैट इज यूजुअली इमोबाइल, एंड इसीलिए what happens is that one, it has remained motile, so the male has to travel towards itself. When male has to travel towards itself, so that means you need a transfer, and for this transfer you require a particular agent or a medium which is referred to as your, obviously this is a pollination, pollinate करने का ये gamete transfer जो है ये pollination है, and you have a number of pollinating. Right, Ritesh, you are right. Anemophily, hydrophily is abiotic only, right? That is what I'm just going to discuss. So the process of gamete transfer, that is, jab female will be, for being fertilized and will be associated or connected with that of the male, that is referred to as your pollination process. And you have a number of pollinating agents. For example, you have the abiotic. So abiotic is the one that will be the physical ones, and biotic ones will be the biological one. So abiotic के अंदर आता है air, water. Obviously the pollen grains जो भी उनके male gametes हैं, they will be taken up away by the air or the wind, and they will be reaching up to the female one. So इसीलिए जो abiotic है, that A is anemophily. जब वो air से हो तो that is referred to as your anemophily, and when it is through water it is referred to as your hydrophily. So once you are using the water as a medium for transfer of the gametes, that is referred to as your hydrophily, right? Obviously these are the physical agents. So if ये abiotic agents हैं, ये physical agents हैं, so therefore they are referred to as your abiotic. And what about biotic? You have a number of organisms, you know. जब birds, there can be birds, for example you have ornithophily, for example snails, you have malacophily, insects entomophily. So you have a number of, right? When they are with the ants, so that is entomophily. So biotic agents भी क्या करते हैं? अब जैसे butterflies हैं, honey bees हैं, they just take away, instead जैसे ही वो nectar लेने लगती है, चाहे वो accidentally intentionally लेकर जाएं, चाहे वो non intentionally लेकर जाएं, so they are the biotic agents of transfer, जिनका discussion, complete thorough discussion will be there in the next lecture when we are going to start up with the next topic of sexual reproduction in the flowering plants. Right, so यहाँ पे gamete transfer में the only thing that you have to remember is that what is pollination. So pollination is the process of gamete transfer. The pollinating agent could be abiotic and biotic ones. So abiotic having the air and water, and biotic ones will be the animals. Run. So this, with this you complete the pre-fertilization events, right? So the fertilization, जो भी events prior to fertilization हो रहे हैं, वो pre-fertilization हो रहे हैं, और इसके अंदर we have to remember the sexuality of an individual, how it goes with the you know, how it goes with the male and female, or how it goes with the biparental nature. Gametogenesis, how the gametes are being formed, what are the different gametes. अब जैसे animals के अंदर तो हमारे पास different way है, अब plants के अंदर the pollen grains जो है, that carry the two male gametes, and the female, it has a single egg, right? So with this we complete the pre-fertilization. मतलब fertilization से पहले वाले जो जितने भी events हैं, they are pre-fertilization. Next very important part जो है, that is fertilization. Yes, Ritesh, it is pollination of, is it autogamy, geitonogamy and xenogamy, and this will I'll be discussing in the next chapter, right? The sexual reproduction in flowering plants. वैसे मैं बता देती हूँ, जो autogamy होता है, अगर वो pollen grains जो हैं वो अपने ही same plant को pollinate कर रहे हैं या transfer हो रहे हैं, same plant same flower, then it is autogamy. अगर वो एक ही प्लांट के दूसरे फ्लावर के, मतलब अपने फ्लावर को छोड़ के दूसरे फ्लावर के सेम प्लांट के ही दूसरे फ्लावर को पॉलिनेट कर रहे हैं, तो दैट इज रेफर टू एज योर जिटनोगैमी. और जीनोगैमी होता है जब पूरा का पूरा प्लांट जो होता है वो ही डिफर हो जाए, राइट? मतलब लेट्स सपोज देयर इज अ ए प्लांट दैट इज ट्रांसफरिंग पोलन ग्रेन्स टू फ्लावर बी, राइट रितेश? डिड यू गेट इट? Okay, so this will going to be in a thorough discussion in the next topic class, right? So fertilization, अब भाई gametes भी बन गए, and now the gametes have been transferred also. अब gametes जो है वो transfer भी हो गए. Now when the gametes are transferred, they are going to fuse. As they come together, as they come in contact with each other, so they are the ones that will be fusing together, and this process of fusion is referred to as your fertilization, right? और ये fertilization को कई बार हम we call it syngamy. What we call it as? We call it as syngamy also, right? Syn is something called, syn designates for something which is blending or fusing together, right? So that is syngamy. So fertilization जो होता है, that is the process of fusion. जो भी मेल गैमीट पोलन ग्रेन्स, लेट्स सपोज अगर हम प्लांट्स की बात कर रहे हैं तो पोलन ग्रेन्स जो आए हैं that will be fusing with that of the female gamete, that is egg. So that is your fertilization, or it is also referred to as your syngamy, and you have a number of events that how it going to take place that we're going to discuss in the next chapter. In this chapter we have just gone through over a broader range ki how does the things happen, or how does different procedures या steps जो होते हैं that take place, right? So fertilization, it is the process of fusion of male and female gametes, right? Next, now we have two different types of fertilization, right? So we have two different types of fertilization. First is internal and the next is external. So as the name implies, internal will be somewhere designating to something present internally, and externally obviously towards the outer end. Now fertilization जो है, अगर मतलब जो मेल और फीमेल गैमीट का फ्यूजन है, if it is taking place inside the body, that is referred to as your internal fertilization, right? And if the fertilization process, that means the fusion process is taking then outside the body, that it is external fertilization. और external fertilization में कोई भी medium हो सकता है, water हो सकता है, air के अंदर हो सकता है, कहीं पर भी हो सकता है, but उस ऑर्गेनिज्म के या उस पेरेंट से जहां से गैमीट्स निकल के आ रहे हैं, उसमें से अगर गैमीट्स वहां पे फ्यूजन ना हो, then it is external. So rather than that of the organisms, अगर कहीं और पे भी हो रहा है तो rather than the or inside the body of the organism, it will be referred to as your external fertilization. And if it going to takes place inside the body of a parent, so then it is referred to as your internal fertilization, right? Okay, here comes the question. It says that internal fertilization is better than external. Obviously, अब वो internally जो है वो ज्यादा protected form में नहीं है. Instead of air, there can be instead of air या कोई भी external medium, right? It can be any. It can just not restricted to the air. It can be in the water also. So it is, since it is not restricted in that, so we can say yes. Somehow, somewhere, the internal fertilization is tend to be more advantageous and more efficient as compared to the external fertilization, right? So internal fertilization is that occur inside the body of an organism or body of the parent, that is having one of the gametes. So inside the body, अब जैसे humans में फीमेल बॉडी के अंदर या फीमेल पेरेंट के अंदर फर्टिलाइजेशन का जो प्रोसेस है, that takes place. So that therefore it is referred to as your internal fertilization. And now external, if it going to take place outside the body of the parent, that means none of the parents is having the fertilization process that is taking place inside the body. So that is external fertilization. So अगर हम internal के करें तो उनमें आते examples, reptile, birds and mammals. And if we talk about the external, so we have the bony fishes and the amphibians. So bony fishes and the amphibians, they have the external fertilization. Okay. So before going that, I just wanted to tell you that internal fertilization is going to be more efficient. It is going to be more advantageous than that of the external fertilization. Why? Because internal में वो internal environment के अंदर it will be there in the protective form, right? Whereas external, obviously, it could be it could be distracted by a number of things, or it could be distracted by the natural environmental conditions that is prevailing. तो वो internal और external, इसीलिए जो internal fertilization है, it would be more better option than in case of the external fertilization. So अब fertilization का जो process होता है ना, जितना भी fertilization का process होता है, that depends upon certain capabilities, और ये reproductive cycles पे भी depend करता है. एक तो है कि फर्टिलाइजेशन का प्रोसेस कब होगा, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन कि कब होगा, विच इज द टाइम पीरियड, विच वुड बी द ड्यूरेशन. द ऑर्गेनिजम्स कुड बी क्लासिफाइड एज कंटिन्यूअस ब्रीडर्स एंड सीजनल ब्रीडर्स. तो अभी तो नाम से ही सजेस्ट हो रहा है या नाम से ही पता लग रहा है कि जो कंटिन्यूअस ब्रीडर्स होंगे, दे विल बी द वन दैट विल बी कंटिन्यूइंग विद द फर्टिलाइजेशन थ्रू आउट द their reproductive life, whereas the seasonal one are the ones that will be reproducing only once in a season, once for a season. अब उसके बारे में हम कुछ देखेंगे. वो कहेंगे कि एनिमल्स जो हैं दे कैन बी सीजनल और दे कैन बी कंटिन्यूअस ब्रीडर्स डिपेंडिंग अपॉन देयर फर्टिलाइजेशन एबिलिटीज. Right. So based upon their fertilization abilities, they could be seasonal and they could be continuous breeders. So अगर हम देखें, अगर हम seasonal breeders में देखें, so this part is your seasonal and this part is your continuous breeders. So if we look at the seasonal ones, so it says they are the ones that will reproduce at a particular period of year. That means they will be reproducing only in the particular period of a season. Right. जैसे अब हमारे पूरे साल के अंदर you have a number of seasons that takes place, or you have a number of seasons, right? You have the spring season, you have autumn, and you have the rainy season. So depending upon that, they are their fertilizing ability depend only upon a particular season. So they're going to fertilize, or they're going to only be reproducing once in the season, or once in a year, or twice in the season, twice in a year when the season arrives. So when their reproductive capacity or the fertilization process depends upon the season, it is referred to as your seasonal breeder. So obviously, as the name suggests, the seasonal will be restricted to a one particular season. Whereas on contrary, the continuous breeders are the one that will be continuously reproducing, that their fertilizing ability does not depend upon the ability of their of a season, of a particular season. So they are the one that will be continuously breeding and keeps on breeding. So they reproduce continuously throughout their sexual maturity. So apart from that, कि जब तक भी sexual maturity रहेगा, तब तक they would able to reproduce. So that is in a continuous manner, and that is why they are referred to as your continuous breeders. And if you look at some of the the seasonal breeder examples, so they include the frog, the lizards, whereas अगर हम continuous में देखें तो वो आते हैं mice, cattle and rabbit. So they does not depend upon upon the season or a duration of the time period of in their year, right? So they does not depend upon that. So that is why the animals could be a continuous breeder and the अच्छा. अब ये तो बात हुई कुछ ब्रीडिंग पैटर्न्स की या कुछ ब्रीडिंग ड्यूरेशन की. नाउ वी कम टू अनदर रिप्रोडक्टिव साइकिल्स. नाउ फर्टिलाइजेशन का प्रोसेस जो होता है ना, दैट टेक्स प्लेस विद द हेल्प ऑफ सर्टन reproductive cycles, and they are referred to as your menstrual cycle or the estrous cycle. So it can be menstrual cycle in some organisms, and they could be estrous cycle in some. So this reproductive cycles जो हैं, they are characteristic of the females, और particularly जितने भी mammals हैं उनकी females के लिए these reproductive cycles are more prevalent, right? So you have two kinds of reproductive cycles, and each have a difference between them. So it is the menstrual cycle and the estrous cycle. Right. So menstrual cycle, and you have the estrous cycles. So menstrual cycle, it says that females of the primates जो है, that is primates are the ones that belongs to mammals. The mammals are again classified, and mammals का एक classification जो रहता है वो primates का रहता है. तो primates की जो females हैं, that undergo a monthly reproductive cycle, which is known as the menstrual cycle. For example, you have the man, apes, monkeys, and it occurs every month. Right, so it occurs every month, whereas if you see it in estrous cycle. The estrous cycle be the one will be followed in the non-primates. So other than that will be the non-primates. For example, cows, dogs, etc. And they could only be, once they are into that estrous period of time, they could only be taking the fertilization process there. So they can even जब भी उनका estrous cycle start होगा, they could only reproduce then. However, the menstrual cycle would be reproducing anywhere, right? At any time of the year, they could be reproducing at any time of the year. So mammals, bilkul, yes, the mammals are included in the continuous breeders. Right, so reproductive cycles. Are there any doubts with the reproductive cycles? The menstrual cycle and the estrous cycles, you have to remember which organisms have the specialized estrous cycle and which organism have the menstrual cycle present in them. Right, so depending upon the duration also, which is more frequent, the menstrual cycle is more frequent, whereas the estrous cycle is less frequent. It only takes place in a few times in the year, right? So with this you complete the fertilization process. Now we know that, okay, the gametes have been formed, the gametes have been transferred, and now they have been fused. Right. Once they have been fused, what occur after it, or what are the events that occur after it? So they are calculated as the post-fertilization events. So post-fertilization events होता है जो fertilization के बाद के events होता है. Right. So they are referred to as your post-fertilization events. इसके अंदर दो आता है. First, there is formation of the zygote. Obviously, when male and female gametes will be fused, they will be forming a zygote. So first thing that occur here is formation of the zygote. The second is zygote will be developing into the embryo. Right, so it will be the one that will be developing into the embryo. Right, so that is also referred to as your embryogenesis. The process of formation of the embryo, so that will be referred to as your embryogenesis. So the first event that we are going to discuss here is formation of the zygote. So it says that diploid zygote is formed obviously when N and N, right? N from the father or one parent and N from the other parent, they will be fusing together to form a 2N. तो इसीलिए हम इसको बोलते हैं कि ये जो formation आया है that is diploid. Right. So therefore the diploid zygote will be formed by किस तरह से? रिपीटेड डिविजन्स. अब जाइगोट जो है उसके अंदर बहुत सारी रिपीटेड डिविजन होती है, तब जाके वो एम्ब्रियो के अंदर फॉर्म होता है. राइट, सो इट विल बी फॉर्मिंग. तो जब भी जाइगोट विल अंडरगो रिपीटेड डिविजन्स, और पर्टिकुलरली यहाँ पे जो डिविजन्स रहती हैं वो रहती हैं माइटोटिक डिविजन्स. Right, and depending upon that we have the cycles that we have already discussed. Haplontic cycle जिसके अंदर haploid stage जो होगी वो सबसे ज्यादा prevalent रहेगी. फिर आ गई diplontic जिसके अंदर diploid phase जो हो वो ज्यादा रहेगी, और haplodiplontic जिसके अंदर दोनों more or less will be equal. Right, we have a few examples. Diplontic जैसे fungal और algae में हो जाए, diplontic like gymnosperms, angiosperms, and haplodiplontic is bryophyte and pteridophytes. So they will be the ones that will be there. So depending upon what occurs one after the other, so they will be the one that is, so process of formation of zygote. So they will be the one forming the diploid zygote. And that diploid zygote, that is a single cell. So every organism basis stands on a single cell, like their life will be depending upon a single cell, and which is a zygote. Then the zygote will be undergoing repeated mitotic divisions, and a number of mitotic divisions will be formed, forming a complete multicellular organism as we are. So every organism life jo hai, that starts from a single cell, which is referred to as your zygote, right? You are right. Exactly right. Hmm. Ectocarpus polycyphonium, बिल्कुल. That is correct. That you have to, see in which organisms. हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि bryophyte, pteridophytes जो हैं वो completely diplontic हैं या completely वो haplontic हैं. There are a few species, a few exceptions in that case कि जहाँ पे हम ये कह सकते हैं कि भाई अच्छा ये पूरा का पूरा जो किंगडम में से ये पूरा का पूरा जो ब्रायोफाइट की जो पूरी क्लास है ये इनमें हैप्लॉन्टिक ही होगा या इसमें डिप्लॉन्टिक ही होगा. Yes, you have exactly, you are correct that you have certain exceptions for it, right? Okay, so yes, this you have to remember that कौन से organism में के अंदर कौन सा वाला life cycle will be more prevalent. Right, so this is about the post-fertilization event. So first is formation of the zygote, that you have to remember that one is the formation of the zygote. The other one is going to be the embryogenesis. Obviously, जब zygote जो है वो एक single cell है. Right, that is a single cell, and when it divides itself, it starts to form the embryo, which is it started forming the fetus, and fetus जब अपना gestation period पूरा खत्म कर लेगा, then it is natal life शुरू हो जाती है, that is infant, और फिर kid, and then adolescent, and then it goes. Right, depending upon भाई अब जो zygote है वो प्रोटेक्टिव फॉर्म में भी हो सकता है इन द फॉर्म ऑफ शेल, या फिर वो इट विल नॉट बी लाइंड बाय एनी प्रोटेक्टिव कवरिंग. तो उसी के बेसिस पे जो ज़ाइगोट चाहे वो इट इज कवर्ड ओवर बाय अ शेल और इट इज नॉट कवर्ड बाय एनी कवरिंग, सो इनको हम कह देते हैं ओविपेरस कंडीशन और विविपेरस कंडीशन. राइट, सो देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एज ओविपेरस कंडीशन and there is a viviparous condition. Right, so let's talk about it. So oviparous is the one where the fertilized egg, that means fertilization का मतलब वो fertilization process हो गया, तो that means it has formed the zygote. So if that is female lay fertilized eggs which is covered over by a calcareous shell, right? So development takes place outside the body of the female body. पहली बात जो development है वो outside the body है, and it is no longer, the zygote is no longer attached or present inside the body of the female. Right, so it will going to be, and it is covered by a hard calcareous shells for protection. So it is covered by hard calcareous. So female जो है that lay the fertilized egg which is covered by a hard calcareous shell, and this development of the zygote is taking place outside the body of the female and is not inside the body of the female. For example, we have the birds. See, you have the birds laying the eggs that is covered over by a shell. Right, so that is birds and reptiles. On the other hand, if we come to viviparous condition, so that is that the female give birth to the young one, and it takes place inside the body of the female. Obviously, जब भी fertilization होगा, fertilization के बाद के जितने भी divisions होंगे कुछ time के लिए, up till it reaches the maturity or up till it is well versed with the environmental condition where it would be surviving. So in that cases, the zygote development जो है that takes place inside the body of the female body. तो ज़्यादा protective जो रहेगा वो कौन रहेगा? विविपेरस, क्योंकि ओविपेरस के जो एग्स हैं that can be preyed, राइट. प्रेडेटर्स उनको प्रे कर सकते हैं और किसी भी इन्वायरमेंटल कंडीशन से दे कैन ब्रेक ऑफ बिफोर दे अटेन अ सर्टेन मेच्योरिटी. अब ये ऐसा नहीं है कि हमेशा जाइगोट जो है वो हमेशा शेल के अंदर ही रहेगा. व्हेन इट अटेन्स अ सर्टेन पीरियड ऑफ मेच्योरिटी इट ब्रेक्स अवे दैट शेल एंड comes out of it, but by that time it will remain inside the shell. However, viviparous में भी सेम है. अब शेल की जगह वो फीमेल अपने फीमेल पेरेंट बॉडी के अंदर ही नरिश कर रहा है. एंड वंस दी फेवरेबल कंडीशंस अप्लाई या गेस्टेशन पीरियड जैसे ही खत्म होगा, it would be forming the it will be a more developed infant, or फिर it will be delivered out of the body of the female. So for example, जितने भी higher mammals हैं, they are the ones which are exhibiting the viviparous condition. Right. So the last part is embryogenesis. So this is the last phase that is going to take place with respect to the post-fertilization events. So that is embryogenesis. It is the process of formation of the embryo from the zygote. It is the process of formation of the embryo from zygote. Zygote से embryo कैसे बनेगा? By repeated mitotic division. So it involves the cell division, which is mitosis. So it is increasing the number of the cells. So it is increasing the number of the cells. Cell growth हो रहा है, differentiation हो रहा है, development हो रहा है. तो सब कुछ हो रहा है. तो once it attaining so that the embryo could able to achieve all the desired conditions for the survival of the outside inside for survival in the outer environmental conditions. So it leads to, और further वो होगा जब वो develop हो जाएगा, सब कुछ हो जाएगा, तो वो it will lead to organogenesis. So it will be the one that will be focusing more on the organogenesis. राइट. तो ऑब्वियसली जब सेल का नंबर इंक्रीज होगा, सेल डिवीजन होगा, उसके अंदर ग्रोथ डेवलपमेंट होगा, सो इट विल बी स्टार्टेड फॉर्मिंग द वेरियस टिश्यूज ऑफ द बॉडी, इट विल स्टार्ट टू फॉर्म द वेरियस ऑर्गन्स ऑफ द बॉडी, एंड देन इट विल बी फॉर्मिंग वेरियस ऑर्गन सिस्टम, एंड द कंप्लीट ऑर्गेनिज्म विल बी देयर व्हिच वुड एबल टू सर्वाइव इन द आउटर एनवायरनमेंट. राइट. तो जब उसको मदर बॉडी से डिटैच करके या शेल में से डिटैच करके जब भी हम उसको दूसरे एनवायरनमेंट का करेंगे, तो इट वुड बी like that, right? So it would be more favorable and it would be more fit to survive in that. So it is just a preparatory phase in which the body is making certain organs in order to survive in the outer environment. So that is referred to as your embryogenesis. So what do you think which have the more chances of survival? Viviparous or oviparous? Obviously the viviparous, because it is protected inside the body. However, the other can be preyed. Now there are other special modes of reproduction. With this you complete the sexual mode of reproduction also. Right. Then we come to some other special modes of reproduction that include the parthenogenesis, polyembryony, and apomixis. So first come to parthenogenesis. It says that it is the development of the zygote. Right. It is the development of the zygote without the fertilization. That means you does not require the fertilization or fusion process. The organism, the new offsprings will be produced as it is. So it is the development of zygote without fertilization process. Right. So that is parthenogenesis. Next is polyembryony. अब भाई zygote बन गया. अब zygote के बाद एक ही एम्ब्रियो बना है. हाँ, उस एम्ब्रियो के अंदर you have a number of cells. Right. अब क्या हो रहा है कि अगर उस एम्ब्रियो के अंदर डिविजन्स होके वही बहुत सारे एम्ब्रियोज बना ले, then it is polyembryony. Have you seen oranges, lemons? उनके देखा कि जैसे ही हम खाते हैं तो उसके अंदर यू हैव माइन्यूट जूसी फ्लेक्स. वो जो जूसी वाले जो वो होते हैं that are referred to as the various embryo. तो उन conditions को हम polyembryony कहते हैं. Have you seen lemon? Have you seen orange? Orange consists of a number of minute papules से होता है जो they are filled with. So that is referred to as बिल्कुल Ritesh, you are absolutely right that parthenogenesis, drone and honeybee, same. That is right. So polyembryony is that is forming a number of embryos. Then is apomixis. Apomixis says that there is a process of formation of new individual through asexual mode of reproduction. तो कहीं ना कहीं पे relatable apomixis होता है कि जहां पर asexual mode but है वो sexually reproducing organism but उसमें asexual mode of reproduction के through that is the process formation of new individual take place. That is referred to as apomixis. और parthenogenesis है कि वो भी sexually reproducing organism है but उसके अंदर एक step is missing which is referred to as your fertilization. So that fertilization is completely absent. और इसमें एक और term आता है which is known as parthenocarpy. Right, parthenogenesis is more to deal with the animals, whereas parthenocarpy, agar fertilization, without fertilization, the fruits is going to develop, then it is parthenocarpy. So parthenocarpy is the one that is more related with the plants, and parthenogenesis is the one that is more related to the animals. Right. So these are the special modes that you have to remember. So with this we complete our chapter. So with this we are going to complete the chapter, the first chapter. Congratulations to everyone, and we'll be heading on with the next chapter next week. So it's not the end because you have to keep on working hard and working. Yes, parthenocarpy in bananas, without seeds, without fertilization. You're absolutely correct. Any other doubts, dear? Any other doubts? Am I clear? Okay, with this we complete this chapter, and in the next class we're going to take up the next chapter, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Till then, goodbye. That's all for today's class.